Now we move to our dessert, I suppose, if you want to call it dessert. We're going to have our last course. It's all very...
Yes, of course. Sorry.
And speaking of dessert, anyone that asks a question in the audience gets a chocolate frog, I'm told. So if you want to have dessert, put your hand up. Now, how acceptable is the use of GM technology to generate barley that needs less nitrogen fertiliser? Let's have a think about that one. Well, let's talk about this one for a moment. I mean, what's the issue with having less nitrogen fertiliser? I'll just ask straight out. What's wrong with using nitrogen fertiliser? We're running out of guano.
We're running out of fossil fuels, and nitrogen fertilisers come from natural gas. So, yes, it's a major.
This is linked to global warming then as well, or is it?
Well, the use of fossil fuels is, but yeah, we're running out of it. The price is going to go up. That's going to impact on the price of food going forward. It's a major limiting nutrient in agriculture, and the only mechanism available alternatively is to use different cropping systems, and that then does decrease the quantity of food that we produce currently under chemical industrial agriculture. So, you know, of course, this is a great idea. I would support this if you could convince me that it was safe. Of course, I would support it, but I'd be looking to other methodologies, and I think we need to also look at rotational systems, biological agricultural systems, agroecology practiced by 40 million people across the world now, polyculture, as ways of providing better nutritional results, not necessarily higher yields, but then again we also need to question the nutrient-dense quality of a lot of the higher yielding foods that we do produce. And if anyone's seen that film, Food Inc., it's a must-see film where US agricultural policy supports the production of corn and soy in massive quantities, which is causing massive ill health in the North American population. Diabetes is one of the major consequences of that.
Well, so actually, that's an interesting point you should bring up, because we've actually got Mira Verma here, who's involved with, I suppose you'd call it that health issue there. I mean, what's your take on all of this? Because, I mean, diabetes, for example, is treated with insulin, which is that using GM technology in any way, shape or form?
Well, that's a use of the technology, genetic modification of organisms to produce healthcare products.
So what, diabetics are already using this product every day, or?
Well, diabetics used to be treated with insulin that was extracted from dogs previously, and from various other pigs and dogs previously. Once we were able to move genes around, we were actually able to make an identical copy to the human insulin in bacteria, basically, and produce them in fermenters, purify the protein, and then use it as a pure version of a replacement for your own insulin that your body wasn't making anymore. So that's kind of therapeutic use of this sort of technology. Over the last, I guess, 82 was when insulin was first registered, recombinant insulin was registered as a product. Since then, there's 14 classes of biological products that are available now that treat things from what are considered orphan diseases, and we have John Hopwood here in Adelaide, who's done an amazing amount of work with lysosomal storage disorders, diseases that affect a small group of people, maybe not as large as diabetes, but where their quality of life is pretty awful and really unsustainable, because their body doesn't produce a particular enzyme that is necessary for your metabolic system to function correctly. And these replacements for enzymes, etc., can be made in genetically modified systems, not for food, but for treatment, for therapies to treat people. And so I think diabetes is a growing problem around the world, and philosophically you think that is controllable by what people do and how they eat and a number of other things.
I just have an issue that bad agricultural policy creates the disease.
I mean,
we're producing low
I think it's actually got
foods.
more to do with lifestyle. It's not so much agricultural policies. I think that's got more to do with.
Well, no, the policy means that it is incredibly cheap to produce the high fructose corn syrup, which produces all these foods.
I'll go back to India. India at the moment has an incredibly crazy diabetic problem emerging. We've got something like 5% of the population diabetic, and it's increasing at a crazy rate. It's not because of corn, it's because sugar is now able to be, sugar used to always be a very tiny part of most human diets until
you're a long way short of the States then. I think it's moving up.
Scott, we're going to move.
Sure.
Scott, we're going to move away from there because someone's going to get a chocolate frog and get some sugar down in the back because we've actually got.
Well, this go back onto the topic of the plant breeding. There are a considerable number of people up there who do find it unacceptable. So from all the plant breeders' perspectives, what are the safety issues, the human health, the environment that are recognised and that you have to try and overcome to make that acceptable in a sense, or get it out there into the market, or even for your own satisfaction, that you are happy that you are putting something out there that you feel you're responsible for it to some degree. So what are the safety issues that you recognise that you have to overcome in your research?
Yeah, I mean that is interesting because if you actually look at those numbers there, really the vast bulk of people only find it slightly acceptable to unacceptable. If you look at the figures that way, so what can you say to that, Mark Tester, for example?
I'm not quite sure. Nitrogen use efficiency is, we can use conventional breeding and do. I mean, it's the farmer's biggest single cost input now. Nitrogen fertiliser. It's already gone up massively in price, and they're desperate to. Farmers are desperate to be able to apply less nitrogen on their crops and maintain yields for less nitrogen. So we need to use conventional breeding, of course, to select for those types of crops, and we can also use GM technologies. So the way we're approaching nitrogen use efficiency is, again, to alter plant transport processes down in the roots and fiddle with things down there to try to help the plant suck the nitrogen out of the soil better, rather than having most of what's applied flush down into the environment and out into the waterways. And there's natural variation in that, but then we're trying to go beyond the natural variation to help the job go a lot better. So for me, the safety issues, the human health safety issues, I think would be really quite modest, because we're really just trying to amplify a process that the plant's already doing. So we'll do a bit of safety testing that's required, of course, but I think we should be focusing more on the product that we're producing rather than the process that's used to make the product. So I want to focus on plants that are able to suck the nitrogen out of the soil. I reckon that's good environmental benefits and minimal impact on human health. If we're going to start messing around with what we're eating in our food in terms of using GM to put insecticides into our food or something, then I think we should ask questions about the health much more hard.
Now, Jason, you wanted to say something on the topic?
Maybe just to bring it up to a more general level in terms of safety and what plant breeders can and can't do. Maybe it'll be interesting for the audience to understand that I can make a cross with a wild relative of barley and incorporate, or wheat, and incorporate those genes into a crop, release that as a commercial product. There are no safety tests, there are no allergenic tests, there are no special tests. I can irradiate those crops with gamma irradiation and create novel mutations. Like Mark mentioned when he kicked off, just about every loaf of bread you eat will have a gene that was impacted on by gamma irradiation. There are no safety tests, there are no allergenic tests.
That probably makes me more worried, not less worried. I mean,
but this is the reality.
I mean, I didn't know I was eating bread that had been gamma radiated to create its in the first place. Well, that actually worries me now. Yeah.
Well, that's actually the history of history of food production. Yes. And perhaps we've got Andrew here, and I promised that I would expose him to the OGTR explanation. But maybe just to contrast that reality of crop improvement and food production across all our sectors, the way it's conventionally been done, compared to the hoops that have to be jumped through for
I'm
GM.
seeing we haven't got Food Safe Australia. I want to hear from Andrew and what you say to allay the fears or
Oh, it's not really allaying the fears. I guess it's just, again, raising the awareness of what is required are you to grow a GM crop. And Scott mentioned before that if you want to grow a GM crop, then you need to apply for a licence, and you need to take a trolley full of papers that show data that the product you're dealing with, the history of it through the glass house,
If we had the gamma ray thing, just to go back to that, if that had started again today, do you think we would have to have the same regulations about exposing things to gamma rays? Do you think we would now?
Very good question, but I doubt it. You're making changes to the DNA, but you're not actually adding anything to it. So, the irony is that with some genetic technologies, you're actually doing a very similar thing. So, for example, you might use a technology whereby you turn a gene off, not add a new gene or anything like that. So, again, it's just another technology. So, we talk about GM and people always think of adding foreign things in. It's not necessarily always about that. It could be about modulating genes that are already there.
All right, okay. Well, someone hasn't had a go there down the back, thanks. So.
Thank you. I'm a general practitioner. I've been for 30 years and I'm a certified biodynamic cattle farmer. I'm interested to hear about the sort of crap that's in our food, irradiated grains and things, because I think for the last 30 years, 70 to 80% of everything I see every day is related to the poor food we eat in Australia, the quality of the food we eat. And that's a massive, massive problem because it's partly due to human ignorance and poor discipline. Farmers are not producing good quality food, even though they think they are. And most of our food is marketed to us by a duopoly. So I totally agree with Scott that basically healthy soil, healthy plants, healthy food, healthy people.
All right, so I take that as a statement there. Now, look, we've seen that result there that we got before we discussed this issue. Let's have a look and see now that we're going to vote again on what would be the answer after our discussion there about the GM technology to generate barley that needs less nitrogen fertiliser. Let's just have a look. Now, looking at that graph, any questions or comments from the panellists about that? We have very little change by the looks of it.
44 up to 55.
Yes. Yeah, that went up a lot.
That was the biggest change.
Yeah.
Biggest change. Yeah, sorry, I thought it was 54.
I think that shows something really interesting, which is when people start off with where they'll punt at normally, then they want to know more detail, want to know more data, and want to know the nuances. But what gene? But why gene? Is it part of it? And they will sometimes move because of that. And that's what we need to see in public. We need to see that public debate, that ability to ask questions, to challenge, to hear from experts, and then let people find out where they're going. So we need to be doing both the pre and the poll testing with all new technologies that come along.
I wonder if we could just have a clarification around you're not getting grains irradiated in your feet so much as you're talking about a technology to generate mutations. Might be worth just clarifying that a little bit more for people.
Especially in the context that we're all mutants.
And why are you glowing a little bit, Jason?
Okay, no, that's a fair point. I mean, yeah, what I was trying to explain was the use of gamma irradiation to produce novel mutations, and those genes are then subsequently used in conventional plant breeding. And the example of the bread is typically related to the semi-dwarfing genes in wheat. That work was done in the 1950s, so certainly longer ago than the last 30 years of our diet. But no, we're not talking about having gamma irradiated grain that we're all consuming.
Well, I think what this really shows is that you are a serious bunch of beer drinkers and you don't want that harmed.